So a few weeks ago, I had said something along the lines of when you're doing a thing and you start to run into some sort of frustration or irritation. I think I was specifically talking about drawing, but this could apply to anything anybody does. When you start running into this frustration or irritation with that thing, I was saying you need to backtrack. You need to go back to a time where things made sense and they felt good. So, because I believe, and this is kind of what I was saying then, is I believe that is an emotional response from your subconscious telling you that something is wrong. So you start running into frustration. That feeling is your subconscious saying, "Hey, I am now somewhere that I don't recognize. I don't understand this. You need to pull back and find something that I do understand." So that's kind of what I was trying to say then. Now, I got the feeling after that episode that some people were rightfully assuming that I was probably saying that you should always stay in your comfort zone. So we got a couple comments like this, but I'll read one by Pranav, I believe is how you say that. Uh, I love Dan's idea of backtracking, but a part of me is afraid of getting stuck in a comfort zone. Do you believe that any new challenge will almost always cause frustration? So I paraphrased a bit, but I think you get the idea. So what we're going to be talking about today is this idea of a comfort zone. First off, what is it? And why is it so hard to talk about? Or why is it so confusing? You know, if something is easy, is that your comfort zone? If it, I don't know, in talks that we have had, me and Mike, we seem to be using all of these terms and they get kind of confusing very quickly, like comfort zone or self one, self two, and all this other stuff. So we want to try to devagify the comfort zone and sort of some of the stuff surrounding it. Um,
Yeah, we talked about Self 1 and Self 2 from the inner game of tennis. We talked about Luigi and Waluigi last week and that whole concept. We've never explicitly talked about it, but we're always thinking about a comfort zone and not in your comfort zone. That's just part of collective consciousness. There's a lot of these things. They feel like these two versions of yourself and you move between them, your ego, the id, that kind of stuff. Yeah, I guess let's just talk about the idea of a comfort zone. I think we've all heard this and used this term probably our whole lives. It's just a very common expression, and we intuitively have some feeling about what it means. But I think if you really begin to consider it, it's not so straightforward. And it might be a little bit parallel, or maybe not parallel, perpendicular, like somewhat of a different axis compared to what you've been talking about. And that might be a lot of the difficulty both for me and others of trying to kind of understand where you're coming from, because
right.
we have this thinking of we need to get outside our comfort zone. The comfort zone is a bad place to be because you aren't changing and adapting when you're in the comfort zone. And maybe that's just not quite the same thing as what you're talking about.
Right.
So I had this, the way I'd been considering this in my head was with this little hypothetical. So maybe I'll give this to you and then you could consider it too and give us your thoughts. But I'm picturing in my head a teenager, like 13, 14-year-old kid. And he's up in his room all the time doing who knows what. His parents are like, ugh, this kid, we gotta get him out of the house, gotta get him doing something. He's just gonna be a loser. So they tell him, like, we want you to do football, like good old head bashing American football. And the kid's like, I don't want to do that. That sounds horrible. And they're like, well, you're 13. You don't get to decide what happens in your life ever. So you're doing football. So thoroughly outside of his comfort zone, he has to go to football practice. And he hates it. It sucks. Everybody's like twice his size. He just gets thrown around. His coach is mean. The other players kind of ignore him. Every single practice, he's like, this sucks. I hate it. I don't know what I'm supposed to do here. They want me to tackle somebody, but it's like trying to tackle a building. They're bigger than me. What am I supposed to do? So it's terrible, right? And he goes through the whole season, hates every second of it, hates his parents, hates his coach, hates football. It sucks. So you would say that he was outside of his comfort zone, right? Unquestionably. His parents did that on purpose. And, well, we can come back to it. But think of that as like hypothetical
Right.
scenario number one, okay? So he goes back, he finishes with football. His parents, have some ounce of reason. And they're like, okay, we're not going to make him do that again. And he says, I really want a guitar. Like, stop making me do stupid stuff like football. I want a guitar. And they're like, yeah, but you're up in your room all the time anyway. This is only going to make it worse. The whole idea was to get you out of the house. We don't really want to get you a guitar, but he's like, no, I did football. It sucked. I'm going to be resentful about this for the rest of my life. You might as well just give me a guitar. He's like, fine. So they give him a guitar. Sure enough, he disappears into his room every day. He starts playing guitar. His comfort zone, I would think. And he loves it. It's super fun. He keeps getting on YouTube and watching all these people play guitar. They're like really awesome. He sees all these guitar solos and cool riffs. And he's like, oh my God, I want to be able to do that. So he spends all his time just poring over it, trying to figure out how to get his fingers to do the things that he sees. And he's listening to what his guitar sounds like compared to someone else's. He just gets kind of obsessive about it. And he just loves it. Every day, comes home from school, runs his room, starts playing guitar. And he gets pretty good at it, within a few months. I mean, this is not hypothetical. This is something I've witnessed plenty of times.
This is my life.
Yeah, right. This is
except
you.
I did kind of like football. Yeah.
Well, the second one's you, at least.
Right.
First one might have been me. I don't know. But no, my mom and dad did not make me play anything. Regardless. Scenario 2. He plays guitar. He does great, right? And I think you would probably consider that to be in his comfort zone. He wants to be in his room. He wants to be by himself. He wants to just do stuff, figure it out, not looking to get thrown around by a bunch of giant meatheads. So there we go. Comparing these two situations. So the first one, I think you'd agree he's being put outside of his comfort zone, right?
Yes.
So what is the benefit of that?
None. Zero.
Okay.
Okay. So this is perfect because I came up with other examples that are very similar to this. But okay, so to answer your story with another story, today I went rock climbing today. I've only been rock climbing maybe 3 times in my life, okay?
Cool.
It's really fun. And I would do it more if the place was closer, but it's not. But so I go to this thing with my wife and a friend, and we start climbing stuff. None of us have done this many times before. This is all of our, third or fourth time doing this. So we don't know the cool, fancy rock climbing people terms, like hook leg or whatever. I don't know. See, I don't
Clearly, you don't. Yeah.
I can't even fake it
Good example.
for a single term. But
right.
So we go in there, and the only things that we know how to do are, the stuff that's similar to climbing trees or a ladder or, a playground, So you go to the easy ones, and you can kind of figure out how to do it.
Is this bouldering or top roping?
Both. They had a place with both of them.
Okay, cool.
But the same lesson applies to either one. But we're bouldering, and we choose the easy one, and we're all kind of able to do that. And then you go a little bit harder and whatever. And that's really fun. And then you find one where you get halfway up, and then you're like, oh, I can't do it. And then you drop down, and you're like, no, I'm going to try it again. I think I can get it this time. So then you climb it again, and you just almost get to the top, and then you fall down, and you do it again. And then finally, you get to the top. You're like, yes, my comfort zone has just been expanded. Okay? I just expanded my comfort zone a little bit. A new level has been reached. But then you look all the way down at the end, and they have, the black course. And it's like the super advanced, super fancy rock climbing course where it's just like this 2-inch square little thing. And then 20 feet across the board is this other tiny little thing. And then somehow you're supposed to leap from this all the way over to that using some kind of magical trick that it's so far outside of my realm of knowledge of rock climbing that there's no possible way I can do it. And there were a few of these things that I tried, I tried this like there was like three little rocks and then one way off. And I tried like grabbing the first one, sort of running up these two rocks and then leaping for the other one. And I tried this like 5 times and I could not get it. It was just outside of my realm of possibility. So I asked somebody else to show me, like, hey, do you know how to do this? And they were like, oh yeah, you have to do this super fancy trick, and I've been working on it forever, but I can't quite get it. And they showed me, I was like, yeah, forget it. There's no way I can do that. So for me to go way out of my comfort zone into this alien thing that I just cannot do unless I work really hard at somewhere else, it's just stupid. Like I didn't learn anything from that other than the fact that I can't do it. So there was a limit of things that I could try that actually helped me. If I went just a little bit outside of my comfort zone and I found a way to connect this new piece of knowledge to my existing knowledge, then it's like my comfort zone got a little bit bigger. And that's what you want. You want your comfort zone to grow, right? You don't want to go so far out of your comfort zone that you completely fail. You don't want to try this super fancy black course when you've only done this like a couple times before. So, yeah, I guess the way I've been thinking about this is that yes, you of course, I don't want anyone to ever think that I imply that you should be lazy and sit in your comfort zone forever and never push yourself. Never in a million years do I want people to think that that is what I'm promoting, ever. But what I am saying is do it in a way in which your comfort zone grows. So you might move a little bit out of your comfort zone to challenge yourself, but it's in the realm of something that you understand. And if I can ramble on a little bit longer, the other example that I came up with, and I'm actually going to ask you to not comment on this until I finish, because it's a Starcraft. It's a Starcraft.
All right, I'll mute myself.
Metaphor.
I'll just go ahead and
yeah, because it might not be 100% accurate, but
yeah.
it's at least close enough. And if anyone doesn't know, Michael has played Starcraft a couple times before. He's sort of a beginner at it. He likes to have fun with it sometimes. But anyway. In StarCraft, it's this game where the point of the game is basically world domination, right? You start off with this little home base, and your goal is to expand, defeat the other people, defeat the other colonies and civilizations, and continue to take over the whole map. You can nod your head. Is that okay? And in this game, you can be one of like 3 different races. So in this case, we will be the alien race, the Zerg, okay, which is my favorite to play. I think it's Mike's as well. But you start off with this little home base, and you're this alien civilization. And one of the rules with this alien civilization is that you can only build on this goo. It's sort of like if you think about your lawn, it's like you can only build on your lawn, all right? Your grass. You can't go outside of that. So you're this Zerg alien colony, and you start off with this home base and this little bit of goo, all right? And then you can build another building on that goo, and then it expands your goo. It's called the creep, all right? So it expands your creep. I think I'm killing Michael a little bit, but you expand your creep, and then you keep building, and your creep keeps growing and growing and growing. Now, of course, the point is to take over the whole map. And there are these other places of resources that you want to run off and get, right? You want to go start a second base somewhere else and take those resources. So you will be stronger and have more area on the map, okay? But the issue is that, and you can do that. You can go off of your creep to start another home base, but it's difficult to do because if you do it with low defenses, people will just kill you because you're very vulnerable when you do that. But you can do it. So you can leave your creep, your home base, and go try to start a second base. But it's very difficult to do, and you have to make sure you have the right manpower and whatever in order to do that. But it's very difficult to do. So, okay, you might have to unmute yourself because I might have been losing my train of thought a little bit. But basically, what I believe is that when you are in your comfort zone, when you're in your creep or whatever, the best and the safest way to do things is to slowly expand from your creep. So you take your comfort zone, your kid up in his room, He's already a loner. Give him a guitar. He'll probably be great at it. Uh, he's sitting in his creep and he just expands it a little bit here and there. You don't take him off of the creep and put him all the way across the map away from his homeland because he won't survive. He won't survive in the football field. Now, clearly this doesn't apply to everyone, but you don't travel too far out of your comfort zone to where your brain stops making connections. If you travel too far out, you lose all of your defense and all the connections that make sense. So you want to slowly expand right on the edge of your creep, on your goo, on your comfort zone. You just push it a little bit and a little bit and a little bit, and it keeps growing. And then you're this massive army that takes over the, world domination and everything belongs to you. But okay, you can talk again.
Okay, man. That was great. That was spot on. It
Okay,
was a
cool.
very good analysis of StarCraft, especially Zerg. In fact, I think the one of the main strengths, maybe the main strength of me as a player and my playstyle is my ability to expand the creep around the map. That's something I really prioritize. So that was a great thing to bring up.
Well, I mean, you start thinking about it, and okay, this might get into some other things, but any army, if your forces are way out there and they're
Mhm.
low in numbers and low in resources, you have to pull them back. You don't charge forward. You pull them back to your home base. You recharge,
Mhm.
you gather more troops, whatever, and then you go out again. If when you're in battle and you're doing great and everything's working wonderful, then you push forward. You say charge on and you keep pressing. But when things start going bad, when you start feeling that frustration in whatever you do, you have to pull back or else you'll lose everything. And that's what I've found with me is I start learning these really hard skills that are sort of alien to me, and then I expect them to sort of become my home base. But I crumble and it all falls apart because I haven't successfully tied it to something that's comfortable to me, and it just dies away. Bec- well, for many different reasons, but I don't know. Is that kind of ringing
Yeah,
true for you, or
yeah. So I kind of want to slice this up a little bit thinner because I think a lot of us are familiar with this idea. I forget what it's called, like the proximal learning zone or something like that. But basically, you want to push a little bit, and that's good. But you push too much, and things kind of fall off a cliff, right? Like you said, you try to put a base out in the middle of the map before you have good creep spread, and your opponent's just going to kill it, and then you're probably screwed, and you're going to lose the game. You got to like grow things out. So, fighting on the edge of your creep. That's what you do. But I think there's more going on here. So take my little example of the kid who gets shoved into playing football versus playing guitar, right? So he goes to football practice and he's super uncomfortable. And as someone who has been uncomfortable once or twice before in their life, I can tell you this. When you're very uncomfortable and you're in a weird environment and you're not really sure what to do, you tend to analyze things a lot and overthink them a lot. It's very hard to be funny. I think being funny is actually like the true test of whether you're comfortable somewhere is if can you be relaxed enough to make humorous connections and to say them with reasonably good comedic timing. Like that means that you have to be at a comfort level, right? But okay, never mind humor. Like if you're uncomfortable, it's very hard to function well, and you spend a lot of your time in your own head, which this kid hypothetically at football practice is doing. Like, oh my god, I hope I don't get picked. Oh man, they're going to throw the ball to me again, or they're not going to throw the ball. Like that's typically what would happen. So you compare that to what we've talked about a ton from Tim Galloway's stuff, the self one and the self two. Being out of your comfort zone in this example very much puts you thoroughly into self one. And as a quick reminder, the inner game of tennis way of thinking is that self one is your conscious thinking, verbal, logical self. And then your self two is the unconscious self that handles motor skills and innate knowledge and things that can't really be put into words explicitly. So you're out of your comfort zone and you're very much in self one in this first scenario. In the second scenario, this kid is in his comfort zone, although we could say maybe he's on the edge of it because it's something new. It's a guitar. He's never done this before. So there's probably some amount of like apprehension and some discomfort there, right? Or at least it's something new. But he feels good. He's not having to, hyperanalyze things. He doesn't have somebody yelling at him and worrying about social dynamics. He's just kind of doing what's in front of him, just looking up stuff, trying things. So he's very much feeding the self two part of it. Now, I'm not saying that comfort zone equals self two and outside your comfort zone equals self one. In fact, I'm kind of trying to eventually say that these are just independent spectrums. But I want to start by drawing that distinction that the inner self, the self two, and the comfort zone, I think they're parallel or perpendicular concepts. Like they're different things. And one of the dangers of being outside your comfort zone by a decent margin is that it, I think, tends to lead to that self one type of thinking. Is that something you agree with?
Yes, and that's kind of something I've been thinking about is the self one, self two. When you're sort of in the zone of self two, does that mean it's your comfort zone? I think we need to define comfort zone.
Yeah.
Or try to, because I think it's thrown around so loosely that there may not be an exact definition or an agreed upon definition.
Right.
But for us, do you think we could define it?
I mean, we can try. We can at least define it for ourselves so that we can talk about it, because I think we need to do at least that.
Right.
To me, the comfort zone implies familiarity, I think, as like the main feature, where, if you loved playing guitar and then you said, okay, well, now I'm going to try playing piano, it's a different thing, but you're used to sitting down and playing an instrument and you're used to that process and you probably aren't afraid of playing the piano. Like it's new, it's a new challenge, it could be very difficult, but it's like roughly still in your comfort zone because it's a thing that you are comfortable with. Whereas if someone said, "Hey, I want to take you out to do ballroom dancing," and that was, imagine you're someone like me, you would go, "Wow, that's about as far from my comfort zone as you can get. That is just way, way out there because I don't really go to places and do dancing and certainly not that kind of thing. Like that's way outside the comfort zone."
Right.
Even
you don't
like
recognize there's nothing that you have that's similar to that.
right.
At least at first glance. So
Yeah.
yeah.
It's completely unfamiliar. I can't even picture what that environment would look like. I have no idea how to act. I'm going to be worried about, am I going to do something dumb or just it's totally foreign. It could turn out to be super easy. Maybe it's like a class for 80-year-olds and it's a couple steps and I get there and it's like, wow, okay, this isn't really hard at all. It's not really so much about the challenge of it. It's the familiarity part. To me, that's the outside your comfort zone thing.
So I was learning the solo the other day. So it's a pretty simple solo. It's Take It Easy from the Eagles. It's this little solo. But I'm learning it. And, I get like 2 or 3 measures in or something. And, it's all making sense. Everything makes sense. I know what I got to do. I know the notes, whatever. And then I keep playing into the 4th, 5th, and 6th measure. And then all of a sudden, I'm just playing random notes. I have no idea where they fall in the song. I don't know it well enough. I have no idea how they relate to the notes before it or what comes after it. I'm just playing random notes. And I start to feel a little frustrated and a little lost. And I don't know where I'm at. And it hit me. I need to back up to something that I know. So I go back to the 2nd or 3rd measure. Okay, I know that. I know that. Oh, this is the note that I'm losing it on. This is the uncertain thing. This is the thing that I don't recognize. And that kind of took me to a place that I didn't recognize at all. So it's depending on how you look at this. You could say I'm in my comfort zone because I'm playing guitar, or you could say I'm out of my comfort zone because I stopped recognizing things, or I'm out of my comfort zone completely because I'm learning a new solo, whatever. I mean, there's so many different ways to define this, but the way I was feeling was that I'm sort of at a comfort level, and then all of a sudden I'm not at a comfort level.
Right.
I'm recognizing things, and then all of a sudden I'm not recognizing things. And as soon as I stopped recognizing things, I stopped learning. There was no information nothing was sticking. It's all just falling off. There's these notes, but they don't mean anything. There's no relevance. They don't relate to anything. They're just falling off. They're just random notes. And I think being able to tell when you're at that place is a really good way of knowing whether you're learning or not, or being able to recognize that. So I feel like looking at that situation, depending on the filter you use, you can define the comfort zone in so many different ways.
Right.
Like, I'm learning a new solo. I'm out of my comfort zone. I don't know. I mean,
Yeah. Okay. So again, I think this word is used so loosely to cover so many different concepts that's probably a major part of the problem here. So as I said, in my mind, the main feature of the comfort zone is kind of almost a social thing or an environment thing or just an experience I'm used to versus not. What you're saying here, I think is an extremely important thing to bring up because it often does get used this way too, which is this idea that when you're doing something, it can feel very comfortable and easy, or it can kind of reach to the other end of the spectrum where it's extremely uncomfortable and frustrating. And I think that was even part of Pranav's question, which was, is frustration an important part of this? And should I be frustrated if I'm learning? And I've heard this so many times, like, oh, if you aren't, frustration is a signal that you're learning. I think we really have to be careful what we say there and exactly what that means, because like you're saying, you're working on something. You find yourself in this situation where you just don't really know what's going on. You don't know how the notes connect to anything anymore. You're not sure where you're at. And I think unambiguously, 100%, that is a bad place to be. That is something you are trying to avoid ever getting to. That feeling of being lost. Like, you do not want to be lost. I mean, maybe it's a sign that you were pushing yourself or something. And so, I don't know, maybe you could make an argument there, but being there is bad because pretty much by definition, if you're learning something, you are making connections. You are putting new notes in the sequence of the solo you're playing. If that isn't happening, if you don't really know what you're playing or what you're doing, you're not doing that. You're lost. Nothing good is happening in that situation. And from personal experience, any time spent in that place is very frustrating. It feels very bad. When you're right on that edge, I know these notes, I know the first two bars, and then, okay, here's a couple more, and I gotta kind of get them in my memory, and I gotta figure out how to play those, and it's maybe a little bit difficult or whatever.
That's it's happening.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, it makes sense. You see it. You're just kind of having to piece that together in your mind and, getting your fingers around it and everything. Like, that is an excellent zone. That's where you would want to be. But as soon as you get to the point where you're lost, where you're not sure how it connects anymore, where you can't remember what the previous note you just played was, then you're gone. You're lost now. And the learning has ceased. And the frustration goes way up. When you're in that like proximal learning zone, that can feel challenging, but it feels exciting. Like, it feels good in a way. It's like good effort. And that's a huge difference between that and that frustrating bad effort in my mind.
Yes, exactly. Okay, here's another example. On Friday, today's Sunday, on Friday, we've been working on this thing for like 2-3 weeks. We had this massive deliverable that had to go out on Friday.
This is
so
work.
Yeah, at work. And so the team of artists is sort of split into two. There's team 1 and team 2. It's not that important, but I'm working very, very hard the whole week, whatever, and I finish about an hour early on Friday. So I say, okay, I'm done. I'm going to go help team 2. So immediately, team two is like, awesome, help us. We have this piece that we need you to do, and we need you to do it by 6. So you have 1 hour to do this. And it wasn't creating an entire piece. It was coloring this line work of this huge scene. So it's this enormous scene with like these minarets in the background. It's this huge marketplace, and it's just line work that somebody else had done. But I mean, there's all kinds of people in there, and objects and buildings and all kinds of stuff, trees and bushes and water and boats, and it's filled with all these different things. But I get the piece, and they're like, okay, you got to color it in 1 hour. Here's the reference for it. Here's what we want out of it. Can you make it look beautiful? I'm like, yes. And they're like, go. So I have 1 hour to do this, and my brain just lights up. It's okay. I'm going to make it look like this. I know exactly what they want. I know what the client wants. I know what I want out of it. I want the colors here. I want this and that. And this is my focus. And it's going to look like this when I'm done. Go. And my brain just charges full speed ahead. I know my Photoshop really well. I know my colors really well. I know everything in the scene, everything that goes into this. I've done this stuff for 6 years, and it's like my brain lights on fire, and I just speed through this thing. I know, like, my brain is doing all kinds of predictions of, okay, I'm going to be at this point at this time. I'm going to get this done here and whatever. And, and I finish it right on time. It looks amazing. Like, everything was perfect. Like, I could not have done better. I mean, it's not like a masterpiece of the
Yeah.
world, but I completed the assignment with flying colors, pun intended, and I felt like, okay, was I in my comfort zone or what? Because I was pushing myself with time. I'm like, rushing through it. I'm excited. I'm trying to hit everything, exactly right. And I realized, like, I think I was in my comfort zone. And I think I've been working for years to be in that exact place where I don't have to deal with problems in Photoshop. I don't have to deal with questions of what color goes where and what color temperature is this and what lighting does or whatever. Like, I am just in the zone, 100% comfortable with everything I'm doing. I don't have any unanswered questions. I'm not dealing with any frustration. I'm not, like, the only thing I felt that I was pushing myself on is the speed in which I'm doing everything. But I think I've worked really, really, really hard to get to that exact point, which is I've expanded my comfort zone to a point that can include all of those things. And I think that that's exactly where I want to be. And, later I can look at this piece and try to figure out if there's anything I could have done better. Because obviously we could always do better, I guess. But with the time I had and everything, I think I just nailed it. And I think that that's what you aim to get to is that type of comfort zone. Um, and I don't know. I don't know if I could say I was. I don't know. I mean, the amount of challenges that were presented to me,
Right.
I guess you could say they were outside of my comfort zone, but I overcame them all. And so I think that's. I don't know. I think that's what you want. That's the point that you fight for, is to be at that place where you can handle all the challenges thrown at you. I don't know. I don't know how I would define that
Yeah.
in terms of, comfort zone or not comfort zone. All I know is that it was challenging, but it felt great, and it was fantastic. Like, it worked really, really well.
Okay, so just to kind of throw something else in there before we keep going on this. Another very common meaning of the term that I've heard used a lot is someone will say, I mean, I've said this, I think, oh, I sit down at the piano and I start playing, and it's the same stuff. It always just feels the same. I'm hitting the same chords. I'm playing the
Right.
same little riffs. Like, yeah, maybe I'm improvising. Maybe it's not literally the same as last time, but it just feels so familiar. I just feel like I'm sitting there in my comfort zone. I'm not I'm not reaching beyond what I've already done, and I feel stuck. And I think a lot of people are in that same boat, musically or in whatever pursuit they're talking about. It's like, man, I feel like I'm just doing the same stuff. So I'm stuck in my comfort zone. And I think maybe that's even a somewhat different meaning of the term, where, and I'm not even really sure how to define this one either, but what you're describing does not sound like the comfort zone by that definition, because you are being pushed, even though it's something you're familiar with, it's your comfort zone by my kind of social familiarity definition. But you aren't in the comfort zone as in, oh, I'm just doing the same stuff I always do. I can't get out. Like, you have a pressure there to do it quicker, to do it faster. Sounds like you're very alert and focused and all of
Hmm.
that.
So I did all of that, and everything I did, working on the piece, it felt 100% natural to me. Where, the colors I'm using, the way I'm approaching it, the theory that I'm thinking of, whatever, all of it just felt very natural to me. And I bet that if I did 100 more of those, they would start looking very similar, because there's nothing in the mix that's taking me, to the next level. I killed this one, but if they gave me another one, I'd be using a lot of the same tricks, and then a lot of the same tricks, and it just kind of, they would begin to look the same. And of course, you don't want that. You don't want to do the same thing over and over and over again. You want to push yourself. But there's a risk that you take when you introduce something new into the mix. If I was dealing with, let's say I do this same piece on Friday, but instead of doing everything 100% natural, I decide to use a different version of Photoshop. Well, every 5-10 minutes, I'd be running into something that was alien to me, or didn't make sense. And then I would have to go and figure out how to fix that. And then I'd get back to the piece, and then all of a sudden something else would go wrong. And I'm like, okay, I guess I got to stop, figure out what this is, solve the problem, and then go. And maybe the next piece I work on, that could be natural to me and everything flows. But for this piece, I would be sacrificing a level of quality to achieving that new level of skill. Because every time you introduce something like that into the mix, it becomes kind of clunky. All right.
Mm-hmm.
You introduce too much, you can't do it. If I introduce 10 new things, I wouldn't even be able to finish the piece. Right. So in this case, at least, and I think this applies to a lot of things, especially when you're creating something like a new picture or writing a song or whatever, if you're introducing new stuff into the mix, you want it to be just enough to where you can still accomplish the task at a natural level that feels fantastic, but also sets you up to succeed even more on the next one, right? But you don't want to introduce so much that it cripples the entire process and you just suck, because then there was no point in you getting everything to a natural place to begin with. And I feel like this is sort of a tangential conversation. It's this mentality that you must always be doing really hard things, that you always need to suffer when you do a piece.
Mm-hmm.
Like if I'm at work, oh, it's easy. Well, I need to add 20 new things to it. I need to suffer through each piece. But when I do that, it sacrifices the quality level of the work. Just like if I go to write a song, I don't want to be introducing 20 new ways of playing, because it's going to be clunky and frustrating. It's not going to make sense. And then I have sacrificed the musical intent that I had, or the expression that I had. That's what I was running into at life drawing classes, is that I'm trying to use all these new techniques and all this crap, and all it does is make me do a really shitty drawing. Like introducing too much at one time cripples the effect. It diminishes it. But introducing just a little bit here or there seems, I don't know, or you want a place where you can be 100% natural, and then you want to add something on top and incorporate that, and grow your comfort zone, grow your natural abilities, because that is the end goal, right? Is to have everything at a natural level, and then expand a little more. But you don't want to be crippled by new skills. Am I saying too much at one time, or
Well, I
making
don't
any
know.
sense? Or okay.
Well, all right. So I want to give an example from StarCraft, because you said StarCraft, and that means I'm allowed to talk about it this time.
Okay, just be
So
aware that many people have not played StarCraft.
I'm going to say a bunch of words that nobody understands, but it's fine, because
Okay.
based on context and the general intonation and cadence, you'll understand what I'm saying. So I playing StarCraft, in a particular matchup. Like you said, there's different. You can tell how old the game is because we call them races, and in more recent games we would call them like factions. But
Right. Yeah. I felt weird saying that the first
I
time.
know,
Yeah.
right? So yeah,
Yeah.
I'm the best race. Um,
Faction.
and well,
Okay.
till I move
Sorry.
to a new game, it's gonna be called race anyway. So I have this. There's a style of play that I'm very familiar with and I'm very good at. It's one of the things that like really helped me climb the ranks was just identifying the certain play style and just really, really trying to nail it down. I would play every game this way. If my opponent was a Zerg and I'm also a Zerg, I call it a mirror matchup where you're both the same. Like this was the style I would play. I would do a very fast three bases. I would make a bunch of Zerglings and Banelings and then try and run around the map and move faster and attack in more places than my opponent can handle and try to kill them that way. And even if they didn't make much sense, even if they were, playing a style that this wasn't very good against, I would still do it and just no matter what, just try and figure out every single little niche scenario and just nail it down to the nth degree. And I got very good at this. And I was very much in that zone for a long time of this is comfortable, but I can push myself a little bit. There's a very high skill ceiling for this play style. So like I can almost always just move a little bit faster and split a little bit better and that kind of stuff. So I feel like I was really in that zone for a long time. But eventually, as my overall skill progressed, I start to get to literally the top of the ladder where you're playing really good people, ex-pro players, streamers, all those types. And so I was kind of hitting the ceiling on that where some of them just really know how to play against this. And so I just kind of got stuck where I just wasn't really winning very much in this matchup anymore. I'm like, well, I'm sure I could eke out a little bit more and get a little bit better. I'm not saying I'm executing this at a world-class level or anything, but I do feel kind of topped out. And a big downside of basically having one play style is that they start to figure you out, where they just know what you're going to do because you always do the same thing. And that's the problem when you're playing at the top, where you wind up running into the same people all the time and they kind of know you by name. Anyway, so a while back I was like, okay, I got to do something else. But you run into this problem of, okay, I want to learn a completely different style. I'm going to do a style where you stay on two bases, you don't make any Zerglings or any Banelings, you make much slower
Right.
units, you kind of turtle up on two bases and then do this big move out, and it's just a totally different style. The game goes in a totally different direction. And so I tried this, and of course I just get smashed because I'm at the level where I'm playing people that I can beat 50% of the time playing my absolute best, but switching to a completely foreign style, it's like I barely even know how to do it. I can barely even execute the build, never mind understand every little nuance and find this
Right. Right.
little tiny opportunity and you know edge out the opponent that way. So I'm just getting completely destroyed. Like, okay, this sucks. I gotta rethink this. So I logged into the European server, and the way Starcraft works is you play on your like I play on the American server. You go to the European server, and it's almost like you're a whole new person. Your account is basically reset. You're playing totally different people. Your skill level's different. So I'm just like, all right, I'm just
Right.
gonna play
Right.
over there, start brand new, and I'm literally not going to care about winning or losing. The only thing in the world that I care about is trying to get this figured out. First, can I execute this up to the 4 minute mark without just totally destroying it? And like at first, it's weird, it's clunky. I don't really have the memory in place, all this stuff. But I start to get it figured out. Like, okay, I'm getting close. I'm starting to see, the little mistakes I'm making and what I need to change. And eventually, I get to the point where like, all right, I can do this. I can actually execute the opener to a reasonable degree, and I can play the game out. And so sometimes I would win if I did it really well. Sometimes I wouldn't. And the game would go on. But I start to learn like, okay, what's the new things here? What do I have to start watching out for? What are the builds that they can do that, do well against it and aren't good against it? And I started to get this figured out. And eventually I'm like, all right, I'm pretty comfortable with this. And I played that long enough to where, okay, now I log back into the American server. And I can't play it quite as well as my older style yet, but it's good enough to where in any given game, I can basically open these two different ways, and I'm pretty comfortable with it. And so now I'm at the point where, okay, now I can play a game and I can get back into that zone where I'm comfortable with it. I know what to expect, but I can look for those little opportunities to make it better, play it faster, try to, deceive the opponent, do whatever. And like I feel like I'm really back into that zone. So I'd see that in a couple different layers there. One is I was in I guess you would call it a comfort zone, although I'm still struggling with what that means exactly. I'm in a comfort zone, this little island in the potential space of different ways of playing the game, but I'm pushing it. I'm at the edges. I'm getting better. And that was working really well for a while. But eventually it's like that little island just kind of gets about as big as it's going to get. And then I'm just stuck. Like I'm hitting the edges. There's not much to push anymore. So I have to think, okay, I'm going to go completely outside of my comfort zone. And this is like a self one thing where I'm literally on YouTube looking up build orders, finding replays of pros and people who have done this.
Right.
And I'm just being super analytical. I'm taking notes, trying to figure out, okay, what time does this go down? What time does that go down? How are they executing this? It's completely in my head, but it has to be, right? My innate self, my self two can't do this yet. It's a totally
Right.
new
Right.
thing. So I'm trying to absorb all this information, and then my self one, the thinking self, has to be pretty careful about orchestrating this process. Like I said, I was trying this on my home server and it was awful. I'm just getting smashed every game to where I can't really figure anything out. I don't know what works and what doesn't because I'm not able to play at the level where I could ever even win. So it's like, even if I do something that's good, I still get totally smashed.
Right. Right.
So I can't even figure that out. So my thinking self is like, let's go somewhere else. Fresh environment. Nobody knows you. Skill doesn't really matter over here. You're going to be playing weaker opponents. Let's just do it there. And then even on top of that, it's like, let's get in the mindset of, I don't care about winning. I just want to get this figured out. So that was very much a conscious orchestrating type of process. I think that, at least in this framing of the problem, is the getting outside of my comfort zone. But I, at the same time, tried to make it as comfortable as I could and tried to make it
Right.
fun and enjoyable and just to feel like, okay, I'm learning something new and this is cool and I'm not going to worry about all the old stuff and how like with the winning and the feeling really good, all that stuff. I'm just somewhere totally new, something different. So I get outside my comfort zone in that sense. But then the goal, of course, is to eventually get that to where it feels really comfortable and it's natural and I'm not having to think so much about it. I'm getting more into that self two thing where I'm just playing and not really thinking that much and just moving and looking for patterns and recognizing things. And then maybe there's more of that self one analysis after the game. But that was the process there. And that felt really good and it worked really well. And it got me to this point where now I've got this other playstyle that I can lean on. And there's little branches from there too. But
Right.
that's how I've been kind of thinking through it. And I think that version of getting outside your comfort zone is something that I really liked. Although, as I said, it wasn't very uncomfortable. It was new and unknown, but
Right.
I made it feel comfortable. And then the goal was to get it back to the comfort zone where it felt good.
Right. Okay. So I like that, and I agree with your tactic, though you weren't looking for confirmation that I agree. But
I
okay,
did.
this I keep sort of low key talking trash about introducing new skills, right? It seems like I'm saying
Kind of,
don't
yeah.
do new things, stick with what you're naturally good at. And this is kind of what I'm trying to say, because I would not tell you to do that any different, right? I agree with, like, that's great. It worked. Perfect. Okay. But this is sort of what I'm trying to say is that when you are 2, 3 years old, you draw stuff. You draw little stick figures, you just draw stuff. And no one tells you how to do it, you just do it, right? You just draw little stick figures and you think it's great. Okay.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with them. They're perfect for you. You love them. They're great. What happens as you get older is that, for me specifically, I'm 20 something and I grab an art book. Okay. Up until this moment, you've kind of just drawn off of that, I don't know, that thing that humans do. You just do the damn thing. Like you don't second guess it. You just do it. You just draw a
Right.
stick figure or whatever. It's great. There's no rules to it. Then, as an adult or 20 something guy, I grab an art book and I start reading these rules of, okay, in order to draw a figure, you must, check off the top of the head and the bottom of the feet. And then you must count out these 8 heads and then you section it off like this or whatever. And so then I totally throw away all natural ability that I've had to draw stick figures and have fun with art, just in the trash, burn it, whatever. It's gone. Completely forgotten about. And then I think, okay, I'm starting a new thing. And I section off the top of the head and the bottom of the feet and the 8-head figure. And then I'm trying to do proportions. And then it's just frustrating because this is now an alien thing that I don't recognize. It doesn't make any sense. I'm not having fun. Like, I'm trying to follow these rules. And
Yeah.
so I think that the, you know, the way artists draw stuff is, okay, you trash all this stupid crap that you learned as a kid, whatever. That doesn't matter anymore. You have to follow these rules. And you got to do that perfectly. And when you can do that perfectly, then you can draw. All right. And so I was discounting years, an entire lifetime of natural abilities. And, to some level, I'd still do that. But the bridge should have been you start with your little stick figures that you've always drawn since you were 2 or 3 years old. Okay. And then you go learn something from a book that says, hey, make your figures 8 heads high and see what that does. Maybe that'll start making them look a little bit more realistic. So then you put the book away and you go back to doing what you've always done. Okay. But this time, maybe you try, making the proportions like it said in the book. Oh, that's kind of fun. Then you keep playing with that and you keep messing with it and you start adding it to your natural ability. And then you go back to the book and it says, okay, well, try making your head not a balloon head, but try making it look like a real person head. Oh, okay, I'll try that. And then you go play with that and you just mess around with it, have fun with it, and then you add it to your natural abilities. And then that's how you go about learning. But there's, especially with adults, and I know you know this because you taught adults music for many years, they cannot make the connection between play around, bang on your guitar like any kid does, and learn new stuff. They forget about the have fun, bang on your guitar, make noises like any kid knows how to do. And they think, oh, I have to follow these exact rules. They should be married together. They should be the same thing. You have the kid, he's messing around, he's banging on the guitar, he's making noises, whatever. He's mimicking his teacher, whatever. And then just toss him a piece of knowledge and let him play around with that for a bit. And then another piece and another piece. And he uses those same lifetime abilities that he has, that second nature, and then he's just building off of that. And then you never lose anything. There's never this crippling anxiety. There's never this idea that you have to live up to something in particular. There's just this enjoyment and the second nature feeling flowing through it, and it just builds and builds. That's how it should be. And I think we just miss that. We read some rules in a book, and then we trash everything that we know. And then we just try to follow that exactly. So that's more of what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I think we're kind of coming to the crux of it here. I said before, I think humor is like this great marker of when you're feeling comfortable, right? Because you're making a novel connection. You're doing something somewhat unexpected. There's some element of creativity to it that causes people to go, oh, that's funny, I didn't, whatever. Not humor doesn't make sense in every context, but the equivalent of that, like with this Starcraft style that I'm trying to learn, is I think the ability to make novel connections or discover things for myself. If I look at it like, okay, here's the build order, this is what this pro player said to do, so I'm just going to learn this start to finish, memorize it, execute it blindly, and then just do it. And then sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't, and I just go, well, I don't know, I followed the build order. Like, that's a mindset you can get into, and I see other people do this all the time, not just for Starcraft, but for anything, where, like you said, follow the rules, do the thing, and then you just do it, and you don't have any real deep understanding of what is happening, or why do you frame up a human body that way, and what's the benefit of trying to draw these lines this way or make the circles and fill in the shapes, and then when would that not make sense, and what if you're trying to do something different or create an exaggerated character? Like, you don't have any sense of that. So to me, I felt like this Starcraft process went super well because I followed this pipeline really nicely of, okay, new thing, feels different, get in a good environment, just enjoy it, figure it out, don't worry about winning or losing, but then begin to think about it and look for those connections, and then eventually it becomes more natural. And I really think that frustration was never part of that process. There really wasn't any
But
point where I felt frustrated.
no, there was. You started this new thing, right? This second strategy of playing,
Yeah.
and then you start losing in all of your games on your server. You're
Yeah.
losing. That's your point of frustration. You noticed it quickly and you go, no, no, no. I need to backtrack. I need to pull
Right.
back. I need to go to an easier place where I don't find that frustration. So I think,
Yeah,
yeah,
but in this case, the frustration was a signal that things are bad.
yes,
It made me think, okay, I don't. This isn't good. This is not where I want to be. I want to go somewhere else. So that is very different than what I've kind of heard around the
yeah,
self-help sphere of frustration means you're learning. And at least in this case, the way I'm defining frustration, it meant I'm not, and things are bad.
right. That's what I'm saying is that you very intelligently backed away from it quickly and went
Yeah.
somewhere where it didn't exist. And that's how you learn.
Yeah.
I agree. I mean, I guess you can't say all frustration is bad or
Well,
whatever, but
to
yeah,
me, again, frustration is one of those words that's defined pretty loosely, similar to comfort zone. You know, but in my mind, frustration has to do kind of with what you were describing, learning that, Eagles solo of I feel lost. I feel like I can't really affect the outcome of this anymore. Where I'm at, there's a helplessness feeling to it. That
yep,
really to me is the hallmark of frustration, is this feeling of helplessness. And I am pretty sure that you don't really want to feel helpless. Like that is a signal that you're in the wrong place. I can feel excited, energized, I can feel super challenged. I can be doing something really hard. That doesn't mean that it's frustrating. Frustrating, I've given this example, but like if I go lift, I can lift super hard, and if I miss my target, I'm frustrated. I feel helpless. Like I've been working hard and it didn't
right,
matter. I didn't get better. I'm frustrated. Or I can go lift and go super hard, be literally lifting the heaviest thing that I've ever lifted in my life, absolute limits of my body's capability, and I do it and I'm ecstatic. Like frustration is a million miles from where I'm at. It has nothing to do with difficulty and challenge. It has to do with that feeling of, oh, it didn't work. Oh, I don't know what to do, or I feel like a failure. Like that to me is what frustration kind of means. And so in my world, with my definitions, frustration is pretty much always a sign that I'm in a place I don't want to be. That's my
yeah.
feelings on frustration.
I uh, I agree with that because I keep looking for places where I've been frustrated and it's turned out good. It typically is when I'm getting frustrated, it's just a dead end. Like it is a true dead end, and I'm doing something very wrong. And I've had a lot of success recently with pulling back,
Yeah.
finding, going to a different server where things are a lot easier and then working up from there.
Right.
And, I think there's this, we always talk about pushing out of your comfort zone. Okay, get out of your comfort zone, push yourself really hard, blah, 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 blah. But we hardly ever pay any attention to what our comfort zone actually is, or what our natural abilities are, or give any respect to what we actually can already do. And I think that there needs to be a focus on that. I think it's sort of your responsibility as an artist or a musician or as a creator to know what it is that you're naturally good at and respect that and then grow from there. This is a really weird example, but I guess we like weird. Okay. Years ago, I watched this documentary on cuttlefish. Okay. And part of the documentary focused on their mating season, right?
Okay.
And during mating season, the male cuttlefish, the big, tough cuttlefish guys, they will fight each other. I believe sometimes to the death. They will just, violently fight each other in order to win over the lady. Well, there are smaller male cuttlefish that don't stand a chance against these big, burly, strong guys, right? They don't stand a chance. They don't even try to fight. What they do is they disguise themselves as female cuttlefish, swim past the fighting, brawling males, and then go steal the ladies. All right. They do not try to fight because they know they'll lose. They highlight the things that they do have. Their cunningness, their slyness, their slimness. Like they highlight all the things that they naturally have and they're good at, and they win with it instead of brute forcing their way to something that they don't have a chance with. And I think as artists, musicians, just as people in general, if you want to do something well, if you just want to be a good person, I don't know. I think paying attention to what you're already good at and growing that is so much more beneficial than trying to start some other thing far off. Like the kid who already knows how to draw, trying to learn from a book. Like he should do them both, but he should start from the place that he already knows, you know? And I just, lately, I've been paying attention to what I can naturally do. And then I've been taking that and just expanding it and expanding it. And then, of course, the end goal is, world domination. I want to expand the creep over everything and just be good at, tons of things and whatever. But I don't know. I think there should be a higher respect for what you already know how to do and then go from there. If you think of, a nation's army, right? A good army will highlight all the things that they're really good at, okay? They might be great at offense, but really bad at defense. So they know to lean more on their offense and be smart about that, right? And then they know they kind of need to work on their defense or whatever.
Like a soccer team might have made more sense than a nation's army.
Well, okay, yeah.
But
I guess if
take
I
the
was
point.
more,
Just like trying to picture an army. Like, is that what they do? I don't know.
well, I'm picturing the guys with their, around the table with their little army men, and
Yeah. In
whatever.
movies, at
Okay,
least. Yeah.
yeah, maybe, yeah, maybe I'll ditch that metaphor. But I guess the idea is that you work with your natural abilities, you work with your strengths, and then you go from there, or you'll lose the war.
Right.
I don't know why I went to armies, but you get the idea,
Yeah.
right? It would be stupid for you to try to force something that doesn't make sense. It'd be stupid for the skinny, tiny cuttlefish to go fight the big, giant cuttlefish, right? Because he would lose every time. I'm not saying, maybe his dream is to be a big, tough cuttlefish. Then, I don't know, maybe there's some plan in place where he can do that, of course. But if, whatever, I've run my metaphors into the ground.
Okay. We have 4 minutes left, right?
Yes.
Okay. So we better wrap up. So all right, just to counter that a little bit, or maybe not counter, but at least something else. To me, there can be value in taking on something new that feels outside your comfort zone, whatever the hell that means. But it's new, it's foreign, and I think you have to apply a completely different mental process there. At least in what I'm thinking about, which is, the example of Starcraft or other things that are similar to that. It's like a new thing. I don't really know how to do it, but I'm going to look at it, fresh eyes, figure out a good environment, just try to have fun with it, and do that. But the goal with that is to get it, like you're trying to absorb it into your comfort zone, or at least in the sense that it eventually becomes comfortable. And there are certain things that would probably never work for if you're a 90-pound teenager. Don't go play football on the high school football team. That's just not gonna work. But there are plenty of things that you can get there, I think, with the right mindset. But the thing that bugs me, that I'm just kind of fighting with, is the idea that you are learning when you are uncomfortable, in that sense of, I have to get outside my comfort zone, that's where I learn. And I don't think that's the right way to look at it, because I think when you're learning, it generally feels pretty good. Maybe some exceptions there, but I think it might feel challenging. You might feel like you're really having to push, but I think it should generally feel good. And I think that happens in your comfort zone, where you're doing something that you're used to, but you're pushing yourself. You're doing something new. That, I think, is a really important distinction there. And we'll leave it at that, because your computer's about to turn off and my lights are about to go weird.
All right. the discussion will continue soon.
All right, cool. See you next week.